So, Rebecca, I have some emails here that I think you might have some opinions on.
I'm ready.
Patron Noah from Queens. She says, Hi, Dr. Kirk, Umberto, Rebecca, Bob, and all. I have a conundrum that I really don't know what to do about. My boyfriend is wonderful, and I really love and respect him, but his best friend has been sexist towards me, and recently he said to my face, I'm Jewish, by the way, that he found Jews to be dirty and that their traditions were bullshit. My boyfriend didn't talk to the friend for about a week after that because he was so angry with his friend for how he treated me and the Jewish people. But now they're hanging out regularly again, and the friend still hasn't apologized. I know I can't control my partner, but this keeps eating at me, and it's really starting to make me feel sick every time I hear about him, and my boyfriend acts like everything is cool. I love you all. What should I do? Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the company that people keep is important. I mean, I would just want to, first off, your feelings are valid. The anti-Semitism is real. I want to, just check in that you've made sure to tell your boyfriend that this is a deal breaker for you. Yeah, I can't think of much more than that.
Well, I'm trying to think what's going on in the husband's mind, because clearly he's a good person and he doesn't support this. So,
but if it's one of those things, he's never done it in front of me, or he never insulted my people, it
doesn't sound like that though, because he was upset. So I wonder if there's upset. Like some kind of
maybe he's like most men. He only has one friend.
That's another thing to think about, right? But that doesn't. No. That's I didn't like the way that sentence began, but the way it ended is fair, and something I actually thought about. But I wonder if he would say, "Yeah, it wasn't good, but I know that he is listening to too much stupid podcasts, and I know he's a good person, and." He's just spouting stuff that he's heard, and he doesn't think anything bad about you, my wife, or I don't know. It's giving the husband the benefit of the doubt and this guy. But there's a conversation there, right?
Yeah.
And since your boyfriend is a good person, I'm going to assume that he has a good way of making sure that the people he hangs out with are also basically good people. So there's a possibility that some calculation or analysis has been made by the husband that might illuminate. But the main issue is Noah from Queens, your feelings with your husband, right? This racist, sexist person is a jerk face, but it's hurtful when your husband continues to be friends with someone like that, And, maybe your husband lacks assertiveness. Maybe he doesn't know how to stand up for himself or anyone. Maybe he feels intimidated. Who knows? There's a lot of possibilities here. But the assumption that I have is that all three people are good people, and that there are systems and brainwashing and insecurities and traumas at play. Not for you, Noah. You're the only normal person in this scenario. But there's some story. It doesn't mean that you can't draw a boundary. It doesn't mean that it's not a deal breaker for you. But I just wonder what the bigger conversation is.
My brain is starting to turn on, and I have more thoughts. So at the Sonoma County Jewish Film Festival, I saw this movie called Rebellion, which it's a documentary about the Holocaust, and it follows all kinds of rebellions that happened that Jews instigated during the Holocaust. Just, rebellions of making art, rebellions of teaching, rebellions of feeding each other, to rebellions of, putting bombs on train tracks. And they used incredibly graphic images from the Holocaust, and they used the language of Nazis. And this idea that Jews are dirty, Jews are other. This person might not even know why they're saying that or who taught them to say that. But there are, thousands of years of Jews being othered. And part of that is to see them as not human. And so for a non-Jew to say Jews are dirty is like, it seems to be pretty easy because they do it a lot. But for a Jew to hear that is to hear, I want to then kill you or put you in a concentration camp and slowly watch you die. Like, that's the difference.
You're also subhuman, right?
Yes.
Well, is that a thing? Jews are dirty?
Oh, yes. Type it in.
Is that
dirty.
is
Yeah.
it weird that I've never heard that before?
Maybe you have and you haven't let it sink in the way that
Because that isn't the typical anti-Semitism trope.
that you hear.
Right. What I hear is
Jews are
the
money
Illuminati,
grubbing.
they're in charge
Yeah.
of everything, Hollywood,
Yeah.
they're cheap,
Yeah.
but not dirty. Like, where does that come from?
So that actually it's been throughout history, like Jews had all kinds of rituals around bathing. And so they weren't as likely to get the plague as other people were during the many times it swept through Europe. And so it got flipped that, they must be, there must be something like, because they weren't getting it, they were dirty. It's interesting. It's been used many, many times. But if you typed in Jews are dirty, you would see countless references. And then the Holocaust, this idea that like Jews were like pigs, subhuman, other, in the concentration camps, there would be one bathroom for 6,000 people.
Yeah.
Like
It's so fun. It's like, we'll yank them out of their clean, nice homes.
Right.
And literally throw them into a mud pit and give them one shower for 6,000 people and tell them that they're dirty.
yeah. And also,
You're the dirty
and watching
fuckers who did this.
Yeah, watching the movie, which was incredibly powerful, and I hope everyone gets a chance to see it. I was really reminded of Holocaust deniers, and I had this thought of like, oh, if you deny the Holocaust, you probably don't know anyone that was impacted by it, or you deny the impact of it. And any family that I had that was left in Europe, except for like 3 Russian cousins, was killed in the Holocaust.
Yeah, I didn't grow up knowing. I knew one Jewish person until I was probably like 19 years old. Literally, there was one Jewish family in my entire, and I grew up in the same community with the same kids, and we all knew each other. And in the 70s, it was very obvious who was Jewish and who was Christian, and who went, or it was even obvious who was Catholic and who was Mormon. So you are either Mormon, Catholic, or just general Methodist, Protestant, non-denominational, and then there was one Jewish family. I imagine that there was some Jehovah's Witnesses that were a little under the radar, but I don't remember. But I was completely separate and not close to it. And yet, I didn't deny the Holocaust.
Yeah,
because there's
I can't think
history and the consensus among literally everyone who has any grasp of the data, plus all the stories and why would it be made up and stuff. And so you don't have to be close to something to understand the consensus and to appreciate data.
Yeah, but if you view someone as other, you can also easily deny their history, which is happening all over the place now, right? You just say like, that didn't happen.
Did you see the Jesse Eisenberg movie?
Which one was that?
The one from December of last year, A Real Pain.
I didn't see it.
Oh, did you purposely not see it?
No, I'm just, there's so much TV to watch, and I get I have like so much TV I'm catching up on.
I mean, did you know it's about
I
the
know,
Holocaust?
and I want to. Oh, I don't know what it's about. I don't know.
It's
anything
about the Holocaust.
Oh, and
Him and his cousin, so it's fictional, but it's semi-autobiographical for Jesse Eisenberg. 2 cousins who have been friends their whole life, but they have very different personalities. One's very extroverted, one's very not. And they are traveling to Auschwitz. There's like a small tour group, and the interactions with the tour group leader and the other people that are on the...
I was going to go on one of those tours.
Yeah. And it's a psychological character study, mainly, with the backdrop which is very significant of the Holocaust and how they're visiting their grandma's house in Poland, and just how real it feels, and how great Kieran Culkin plays this part, how well it's written for him.
And he won an Academy Award for that, right? Like,
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
And well deserved. Let's read another email. Anonymous listener from Chicago, she says, my male partner came out to me 6 months ago saying that he enjoys cross-dressing. He expressed that while he feels masculine most of the time, there is a small part of him that feels more feminine. He says that cross-dressing is a hobby for him and that it isn't so much about gender identity, but I'm not entirely sure. I want to be supportive of this, as it was vulnerable for him to share this part of himself with someone. However, I cannot help but feel uncomfortable with this cross-dressing. I understand that there is nothing morally wrong with this practice, so I'm not trying to encourage him. I understand that there's nothing morally wrong with this practice, so I'm not trying to encourage him. I wonder if that's a typo.
Discourage him,
Yeah.
I think.
He wants us to go out on dates while he is cross-dressing, and he wants to present as female. But this makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure how to navigate this while being a supportive partner and also listening to my own feelings. Any advice would be very helpful. Thank you. End of email. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, cross-dressing can completely be about gender play and presentation. It doesn't have to be connected to sexuality in any way. I mean, my hope for you was that you'd be able to find comfort in it, or at least some joy or some fun. Your partner is expressing a really intimate part of who they are with you. And if you could join them in that would be great. I mean, I'm thinking of like, I don't want to say it's a hobby, but lots of people do things that their partners won't join them in. I hope that if you can't join them in that, you'll support them in finding someone else to have that experience with. But I bet there would be a lot of grief for them if you said, no, I can't join you in this, because it's so intimate and special for them to share that with you.
Yeah, years and years, 25 years ago, I had a client in a similar scenario. The landscape was much different back then, so there was no talk of doing it outside of the house. But while home, it was a similar feeling for the wife. She wasn't comfortable with it. She didn't want to discourage it. She didn't say, what's wrong with you? But it altered her sexual attraction and her view, not in a denigrating way, but she would talk about how she saw her husband and hadn't really thought about it until the cross-dressing at home, but she saw her husband as a man, and she was attracted to that. She wanted to be with, that was, her orientation, but it's hard to sift out, is that just what you're used to? And is that internalized cross-dress phobia? Or is it innately part of your sexual orientation and innately part of your makeup? It's hard to tease that out, right? And over time, what she found was that the shock of it, or the difference, or the strangeness of it wore off, and it just became a normal experience to her. But years into it, she would still say, if I had it my way, he wouldn't do this.
Yeah, I mean, I also think like in American culture, there's so little room for adults to like truly play and have fun, and cross-dressing is play. I mean, it's serious business for some people, but it's also rooted in discovery and magic, and there's so much creativity in it, exploring.
Totally. But
yeah.
and if on Tinder you were dating someone and they were that way, then absolutely, right? But if you're 15 years into a marriage And then this comes out of the blue, literally, like there's been no indication of it at all, which makes sense, right? Because
it's so stigmatized.
Yeah. So, and as a wife, you love your husband and you're so appreciative that he would trust you with this. And for sure, you don't want him to like suppress it further. And you baseline want to support him, but at the same time, you have your needs. Yeah. And I think that's what Anonymous Listener in Chicago is talking about.
And I'd be interested to know more. I mean, if I were her therapist, I'd be interested to know what are her needs. Is her needs that just as you were saying earlier, her partner always presents as male. That's very important to her. And why is that so important? And what would happen? And, a 15-year marriage, my God, you go through, you're all kinds of people in that much time. But definitely reach out for support. There's a gazillion support groups on this topic. So don't deal with this alone. And I'm remembering that this is the beginning. There's a TV show. I can't remember the name of it right now, but this was the plot, that the man comes out as a crossdresser, and how they handle it. And there's a play on this. Like this is well documented. So I hope that you read and go to a support group and, kind of play around in it and meet other people who are in the same boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's take a break. When we get back, another email from good old Natasha from California. What do you say?
I'm here for it.
All right, Rebecca, we're back from the break. We just got done talking about the best version of D&D, which is, of course, 3.5.
I'm starting to learn.
Yeah. Good old annual long-term middle-tier patron Natasha from California.
We love you for your long-termness.
We do. She says, I've been wondering how you feel about the sort of therapy speak that people will use, particularly in higher ed. As a social work student, it became so grating to me after a while that we can't just speak plainly about mental health-related topics and instead use this sort of sanctimonious lingo similar to the specific religious pockets having a certain cadence and jargon.
Yes. All cultures have their own language.
Yeah. I know it's probably just from a place of wanting to seem in the know and be accepted by the group, but I think it does a disservice to clients when we can't speak just like regular people.
Correct.
Do you think...
Well, let me just say that is one of the reasons that people are attracted to me and to this show is that we don't talk about it in a really academic format. And I have to say, queer culture is the same. There is a section of queer culture that is like so academic and esoteric that I can't listen. I can't participate because I'm just like, bleh! Like just talk like normal people. But I know it like makes them special to each other. And if you can speak that language, it means that you're in the club. And I just can't do it.
Yeah, I went on a journey as an academic, hanging out with a lot of very smart academics. And for the first, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years of my career, when I would hear someone speak with the jargon in that confusing way, I absolutely interpreted them as being intelligent, knowing things that were in a whole other realm that I just didn't even really know about. It kind of feels that way. It feels like they're reading books that I don't have access to. They're like Gandalf traveling to the depths of the libraries at Minas Tirith and finding the old scroll that talks about Elendil and the ring. And then it's like, oh, I must go to Frodo and tell him to keep it secret, keep it safe. And I'm over here as this, idiot hobbit that has no idea what's happening.
Who's looking for second breakfast.
Yeah, and 11sies. And so then at some point, it wasn't really this moment, but this particular moment sticks out as a moment when it really became solid to me that this was all bullshit. That we were interviewing professors. We had an open spot, and we were hiring, so we put out the international call, and we were interviewing various different professors from all over the world. And there was this one guy who was way overqualified for the position. He was he had already been in academia for 40 years. He was not only previously a professor, but he was also a program director, and he was a leader in local professional organizations. He was like one of those guys where they get awards just for their career. You know what I mean? And he was looking to move, I think, or for a simpler life or something. And so he was flying in from across the country. And we asked him I asked him to provide a lecture on systems theory, as if he was talking to students that had never heard of systems theory before. It's a standard, it's bread and butter for marriage and family therapist professors. And as he provided this lecture, that was, an hour long, 45 minutes, he was doing all this jargon, and it had the appearance, if you didn't know better, of a genius, of someone that understood something forwards and backwards that was so complicated and esoteric, but very important, that it's just impossible really to convey. But I know what systems theory is. So I'm listening to him just have the veil of a genius, but the substance of an idiot. And I'm like, this is what I struggled with for the first 15.
This is pontificating.
Yeah. It's either the person actually doesn't know the topic and they just have a really fancy way of obscuring it, which is definitely a possibility, or they're so fucking insecure that because he's at an interview or something, I don't know, and he can't get out of his head that he's tasked with demonstrating how he would teach the students that he's talking to what he knows to be experts in systems theory. He can't get that out of his head, so he trips over his own feet. He's trying to not only talk about systems theory, but he's trying to talk about it in this super complicated way. And I just thought, oh, I never want to be like that. I never want to obscure my ignorance or lack of knowledge or my insecurity by trying to appear smart by using words that I know that only a small portion of people understand. That is, and I know there's some kind of idiom around this, right? Isn't there some kind of
a blowhard?
Well, no, there's some kind of jargon is for the insecure, or for those who don't know, they speak fancy, or I don't know. There's some kind of saying like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I consider it not only just something that I'm not really attracted to it anyway, but I also am repulsed by it. Plus, as a semi-political statement, it's democratizing, and it's not ivory towering myself, right?
That being said, there are actual words in psychology that describe certain experiences, and I like to teach my clients those words. So like they'll and my students. I mean, I remember when students were like, I will never diagnose anyone. Each person is completely unique. And I would have to describe to them, like, part of learning this ridiculous academic language is so that you can quickly speak to someone else and hopefully explain in a more brief manner, if you need to do that, what is going on for this client. So like terms like labile are really helpful to my clients to realize, like, there's a word for somebody who is highly, highly activated and then really, really depressed in a short amount of time. Like, there are these clinical words that I find that I return to over and over again, or like really understanding what schizophrenia is and not using it in the colloquial way is really important.
Yeah. But you had students that were eschewing diagnosing altogether?
Yeah.
That is so fucking stupid. Like, Do you not understand that schizophrenia exists or depression exists?
I mean, I think that there was a certain student that was like, no client.
Why are you in psychology? Go into
there was
religion
an idea,
or something.
Like, no
Or New Age
client
or
will
something.
be a diagnosis to me. I see the whole person.
Oh,
and
please.
And I was like, that's great and all, but you'll need to be able to converse with your peers of different disciplines in a timely manner.
Never mind conversing, understanding human nature. It's such an adolescent way of looking at
I know.
like, why are you in this
They would come to
field?
my class so proud of that, and I was like, here's the deal, kiddo. Like, which would piss some people off, but I was like, this is the actual work, is you need to be able to communicate with the provider.
Well, it's a cop-out. It's like, if I say this, I don't have to learn it. And it'd be hilarious if they said it in psychopathology, the class,
Yeah. Well, I think there was...
And it's so arrogant to think that they could possibly make an evaluation about such a thing without knowing the thing. Now, are there problems with diagnosing? Yes.
Sure.
But if you're basically a lay person as a student, and you are that arrogant to think that you could evaluate the entire practice of 150 years of diagnosing and just write it off, and you're seeking licensure as a clinician,
well,
what a dumbass.
People come into the field with all kinds of hopes.
I never had a student like that, by the way.
Really?
Never.
I wonder if art therapy kind of attracted that kind of
Did you, I mean,
outsider.
what percentage?
Oh, I don't know, easily 25%.
Oh my God.
I would have to I'd be like, if
Why are you in graduate school?
Well, there's
Become a
this
coach
idea-
or something.
There's this idea that it was, and I would say it was encouraged in Antioch, that there was this idea that we saw the whole person.
Sure.
We addressed the racism of the system.
Yeah. And PTSD exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, this is why certain students got really mad at me, because I was like, hey, that's a fun theory, but hey, here's the reality.
Yeah.
They were like, what? And I was like, and this is the other thing about grad school is I had actually just practiced in the field. Whereas you get some of these professors that haven't been in the field, they've just been teaching or they've just had
you
a
guys
private
have,
practice.
You didn't have non-practicing professors in your program.
Yeah, but they been in private practice on the east side or
And that doesn't really count.
I mean, but it wasn't community mental health where people were going to be at their internships.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had this really rough reality.
Well, it got worse. I don't know what it's like now, but there was a time in our programs that it was populated by professors that had very strong private practices and had them for a long period of time. The academia focus on resume, because Antioch started to be more like other institutions for a variety of reasons, some good, some bad. And they started hiring professors that didn't necessarily have a robust history of practicing, but did have a very impressive, and they did have a impressive resume of publication and education and prestige in the field or something. And, there's always a balance there, I guess. But there was a cost. And I think part of it was the groundedness of the professors in actual clinic. Because, to be a clinician is very different than being an academic.
Right. I mean, I remember students that would come in that would say, I can't wait to do Jungian dream work with my clients. And I'm like, 10 years into your career, you'll get to do that. There was a lot of fantasies of what the work will be, and the realities of the work are really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't even know if we answered this person's. I don't even know how
Natasha,
far we got in the question before I went off.
The final sentence that she said was, "Do you agree, or am I just a snob?" Well, so yeah, I think we agree, Natasha.
And I think you will have to find your people, because there will always be those snooty ass people no matter where you go.
And to know that people, because, after a certain threshold for you and me, we had so much confidence we don't need to put on airs or to prove anything to anybody. And so when I see someone that is presenting with a lot of jargon, I just see someone that's insecure. And so I'm not going to pounce on them and say, stop it with the jargon. I just see someone, and this happened on a micro scale with my students as well, that there's this way, I've talked about this before and ranted about it before, how when therapists will take notes, on their sessions, and they will use this really annoying, grammatically incorrect way of writing their notes that I have ranted about and said there's no reason for this. Like, there's a time when you had physicians who were literally writing it out with a pencil, and so they had to be fast, or they were dictating to someone who also had to write it fast, so they would leave out words that were maybe a little unnecessary, like patient indicated pain in arm. That's not a sentence. There's some grammatical errors there, and they would abbreviate certain things. Patient would be PT and blah blah blah. But with the advent of voice to text, or with 5 minutes to write 3 sentences, you don't have to do that. And yet people still do it because. And when I ask interns who will show me their notes with this kind of weird language, I will say, why are you not writing in English? Because when I read it as a supervisor, it takes me a while to acclimate to the language. Just write it in the way that it should be, the way that you would write anything, the way that you would say the sentence or something. And they say, well, I thought I was supposed to write it this way. They never have a justification for it. Or they say, well, I was told to write it this way. And I would say, did they give you a reason why they told you to write in a broken, non-grammatically correct way? And they'd say, no, I just thought this is what you're supposed to do. So I've never heard a justification. Occasionally people will email it and say that they don't have time and they have to be quick and fine, or there's a way of obscuring certain things to clients in the notes that you don't want them to understand, which is actually unethical, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it would drive me nuts. When I write my notes, I write, the client told me the following thing, that she was upset because her husband did this. I just write out the sentence, but if you look at half of have you seen this before? No. You haven't. Do you have, so you don't even know what I'm talking about. No. Like, when you keep your notes, you write in full sentences.
No.
Oh, you don't? What do you write?
I just write.
Do you, you're an art therapist. You just draw like an art.
No, I write out notes, but it's like the most basic client presented this or that issue. Like, it's, and I write CLTE, like I use arrows up, down. Like, I write the most basic
in your actual
paper and I still have
the client file.
I still have paper files. Yeah.
And you write it out with a pen.
Yeah.
Well, the client has to understand what's in that note.
Yes.
So if you have arrows and abbreviations, that's not understood by a client.
I would explain. I would use the.
But that's because if you die, then that's not that. It's not. It's actually not. If you're writing your own notes, then
yes.
you can do whatever the fuck you want. But
yeah,
if you're writing,
I'm decades into this.
That doesn't make it okay. Now, in the scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. But if you were to, but when you talk about a client with me,
yeah, I would never.
You don't go CLT.
Yeah,
you don't talk in broken sentences.
Yeah.
You just But I've heard interns and novice therapists literally, when they talk about a client, they will say, there's this one way of saying things. They'll say, "So client came to me."
Oh. No.
And I'll say, "What client?" The client came to, it just drives me nuts, because all I hear is an insecure person taught another insecure person how to speak as if they're a professional, when it's just it's just insecurity. Just accept you're insecure. It's okay. And you're not impressing. In fact, you're coming across like a fucking hack. Just speak in normal sentences, But so I don't know if that's what Natasha's talking about, but there's other therapy. Do you know that do you know therapy speak
Yes.
online and stuff? Like, what are some phrases that are associated with it?
I mean, nothing's coming to me, but maybe it's because I black it out when I read it. But like,
well, I'll give you one, like
okay.
holding space for.
Oh, yes.
Or unpack this.
Yes.
Let's unpack that.
Yeah. Or there's specifics, like at Antioch, family of origin, and people would just abbreviate it to FOO, and they would put that in their papers. And I was like, first off, no one but Antioch.
So now you know how it feels. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The CLT thing.
Yeah.
It's
so
like just.
I was like, you have to spell this out. And just so that you know, when you leave this Antioch environment, family of origin is not a common term.
Yeah.
So, yes, there are. I mean, we're talking about the ivory tower, right? There's this way in which.
Well, it's an understanding of your audience, I think. If you're in the marriage and family therapy program, well, I still wouldn't accept in a paper someone writing FOO, unless it was like a reflection, FOO, FOO, family of origin, because that's how people abbreviate, because they talk about family of origins, the class, and also the concept so often in our pocket. But if someone were to verbally talk about the class, they would say FOO, and we would all understand it. But if they were to speak with people outside of our little pocket of marriage and family therapy, I would expect them to say family of origin.
Yeah, the other one I'm thinking of is Virginia Satir's. Is it Virginia Satir, Positive Regard?
That's Carl
Okay.
Rogers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would get so annoyed with that term. I would start to say positive disregard. Like I would get.
You would get start over. You would get annoyed with unconditional positive regard.
Yes.
Like in what context?
Because students would use it so much to describe what they were doing.
Like they're like, I was with a client providing positive regard.
Yes.
And
I would say, like, what does that mean? Like, you can't just say that over and over and over again.
So that's another part of this that I would run into is that, like with your frustration with your students who you were talking about earlier, that
it's all coming back now, and I have one more.
Okay, that it's funny. It's touching on a lot of things for me too.
We're like, I'm very angry. I still have feelings.
But like when you were talking about how you need to understand these words so that when you're communicating with other clinicians, we all are on the same page. At the same and I totally agree with that 100%. And at the same time, if that's as far as you go, then you run the risk of dumbing down if you only ever say the word and never expand on it, then it runs the risk of everyone dumbing down the concept to this very simple thing, like with positive regard. For example, I imagine that's probably what was annoying you about it, was that they were saying a phrase, but they didn't really know what it meant. And
it didn't necessarily mean that they were providing it either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have one more.
Okay.
So I don't mean to, I'll just say the story I want to say. And if anybody has feelings about it, they can write it. So I believe that when Anne Blake taught multicultural counseling, or somebody else, they would have these abbreviations for each generation. And when someone would later write a paper about a client and they would have to talk about generational issues, I could always tell who had taken that class, because they would say, like, client grew up in the go-go 80s with and these were all the values of the 80s. But I was like, but was that the client's experience of the 80s? Or are you just cutting and pasting that from some description of what the 80s were? Because that's an inappropriate way to talk about somebody's generation. Like the way that I didn't experience the go-go 80s. I had a single parent, I experienced Reagan's nightmare of the AIDS crisis and, the stripping away of all the services and the homeless crisis developing. That's the 80s I experienced. So that was another way that I would say to the client, the therapist, you need to, if you're going to mention this term, their generational impact, you need to understand how they experience their generation and not just say they experienced the go-go 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're not denigrating Anne Blake.
No, but I'm
just saying that because
we love her.
She's been on the podcast.
She did get mad at me where I placed she always felt I put my name tag too much on my boob.
Really?
Yes. And would like stare at it and get upset with me and tell me to move it further up.
Like she felt like it was like a
boob charm or something. I put my name tag too low. She would always get very upset.
Wow, the things that ladies have to think about.
Yes, and
although I would often wonder about where to put the name tag, not in terms of boob charm, but it is kind of a thing. It's like, is it? Where is it supposed to go exactly? You know, there's a wide zone there where it could go.
Well, not on your, according to Anne Blake, not on your boob. So
do you remember when we got the name tags?
clip-on?
No, the ones that had magnets.
Oh yes, that was even more complicated because it's like, does everyone need to see me stick my hand down my shirt?
Yeah. But it was so much more convenient because you didn't have to pierce your sweater every Tuesday or something.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, I would say the theme of what we're saying here is that these terms lose meaning to the person that you're talking to or about if they don't relate to the actual person or the actual connection that's happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I'm sure I have fallen into this trap a number of times of just laziness, right? You establish a word, and then at some point you basically understand it enough, and then over time you just insert the word without really understanding what you're saying, and or without conveying how you what you mean by it. The last part of this that I want to say is that I totally get the impulse, though, to use this jargon. Like with my doctor a few months ago, I was emailing him and I typed out, I was wanting to ask something about a prescription. I don't know what it was, but I wrote RX for prescription. And I was almost about to, I just did it automatically because it would be the way that I would write that out. And I almost hit send and I thought for a second, oh, wait, I put RX. But wait, he's a physician. He knows what RX means. So we're both on the same page. But then I thought, if I were on his side of things, that would annoy me. Just write prescription. It takes you a second and a half. Just type it out. Just type out prescription.
I have one more example of this.
Okay.
And it's because I saw this really fun burlesque show called Seattle Vice. And it was all about the stripper club scene in the 70s here in Seattle. And it was really, really fun. But there was this total focus, because it was a fun show, of course, there was this huge focus on like disco and fringe and like everybody having a really good time. But that wasn't my experience of the 70s. In terms of like every man and a lot of families were so fucked up over the Vietnam War and having lost someone. And like, I feel like that's a funny thing about the 70s. Not that there weren't 10,000 movies about the Vietnam War, but like, now when we relate to the 70s, it's just like, woo, so fun, and everyone's having a great time. And I was like, I think everyone was over-medicated because they had like so much unresolved grief about like what was happening.
Yeah, that's funny.
So there's a way that like, just talking about like the way that things get summarized.
Yeah, yeah. 80s, with time, there's a way in which the 80s, not all the time, but...
Right, no one's talking about like, hiding in like hiding under your desk and afraid that the nuclear war is going to happen. It's all like day glow and like really huge phones and side ponytails.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. Right. That was like one person in my high school.
Yeah.
Dressed and had a haircut like that, and how things just get reduced. And it just makes you wonder how our today will be reduced in 50 years. Like what will they latch onto?
Memes and everyone's on their phone.
Or Trump, honestly.
Oh, God.
It's interesting because, Twitter and phones, that's before 2025. So it's like what?
It'll be a picture of Trump asleep. Did you see the picture of him asleep today in the briefing where he's getting the jet? No.
Sleeping?
Yeah.
Like he just fell. Well,
He's always sleeping. He was sleeping at the Pope's of Blessed Memory's funeral.
Well, I don't blame him. I mean, he's not young, and he has to sit through a lot of boring ass shit.
I'm so sorry for that he has to do the job.
I'm sorry for our country for having someone that doesn't have the brain power, the energy to sit through a thing.
Give that man some caffeine the next time he has to sit through a meeting.
Well, he has an assistant, and their only job is to give him Diet Cokes. Or no, what was that thing? He had like some button on his. I don't know if this is rumor, but he had some red button on the Oval Office desk that was for Diet Cokes or something. Anyway, let's take a break. When we get back,
Something else.
Another email.
All right.
All right, we're back from the break. I thought you might have some.
Hold on, I'm still consuming liquids.
Okay.
I've got my protein drink and now I need water.
Okay.
Because this is my diabetes.
I like your purse. It feels kind of like an 80s.
Look at this.
Oh, it's a Nike.
Yeah.
There's a swoop.
It's a lunch bag.
A swoosh.
But I'm using it as a purse and I just love it.
I like the side without the Nike thing.
Okay, I'll turn it
But
around.
it's
it
has kind of a Japanese.
Yes.
Like it looks like it has some very convenient but cute pockets.
Yes. It just on the outside. On the inside, it's really just a lunch bag.
Okay.
But it's the perfect size. And since I'm always spilling my shakes in my bag, I thought I'd switch over.
Okay.
But I think it's going to be the purse of the summer for me.
Ooh. Does that happen do you get purses of summers?
Yes. And I also want to do a shout out for Housing Works in New York City. It's the big AIDS charity, and they have an amazing thrift store. And that's where this purse came from. $15.
Oh, that's, wow. 15. I have limited understanding of ladies' bags, and the bit that I do understand is that $15
very expensive.
is a rare thing.
Yes. Well, now you understand my personal style. If it's $15, I'm all in.
Well,
I know,
if you're a shopaholic and cheap, then that's okay. But
yes.
if you have extravagant taste,
which I don't.
Yeah.
Part of going to Las Vegas is I've already scoped out what what consignment stores I'm going to when I'm there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's the consignment store culture like in Vegas?
I'm expecting that it's ostentatious and it's leopard print and I can pick up something that I would never find in Seattle. I'm expecting it's bedazzled. There's
a pretty big Hispanic community. So
yes, but there's also tons.
There could be a lot of
There's tons of dancers and performers and people who might.
There's also people that are selling the shirt off their back so they can bet.
Gamble more.
So it could be a lot of polo shirts and.
Yeah, I'm looking for I'm the last person in America that wears an analog watch. So
wears what?
An analog
watch.
I have a regular.
I think they're coming back.
I always have two.
Is it a wind up? Is it a wind up?
No.
Oh.
Battery. But I always have two going because one perpetually breaks. I wear a watch every day. If I don't wear a watch, it means I'm really, really out of it. But this watch is super cool. And the hours, there's a rotating top hat. I don't know if you can see it.
You can kind of see it.
And the hour pops up in the hat as a playing card. So when it's 8, it's I love this watch.
Huh. Well, moving on. Annual anonymous patron, she says, have you ever had a client bring a stuffed animal to sessions?
Yes.
After wanting to for ages, I finally got up the courage to raise it with my therapist. She was encouraging and it helped me a lot. Mm-hmm. However, I often still feel it's a weird thing to do and worry my therapist judges me despite her telling me that she does not. I'm sure this is tangled up with other things we are working on. So is this unusual? Do you find it an odd thing for an adult to do, Rebecca?
I would not find it odd at all, and I've had it happen many times, and I would support it. I also have stuffed animals in my office. I have a couple of options. I have a huge octopus thanks to my cousin who hand crocheted it, and it's super squishy, and people love that. And I also have one that you can put in the microwave. It's got lavender pellets in it and it's very warm, and I tend to bring that one out in February so people can hold something very warm, and people tend to have very tender reactions to it. So, there's issues of attachment there. There's issues of self-soothing. If anybody wants to bring a stuffy into the office, I would say yes.
What sort of patterns do you see of usage?
For someone, it's usually someone that has limited support in some way on the outside. And, if we want to get psychoanalytic on it, like this is a transitional object from the outside world. It's the flip. Often you take something out of therapy, but this is bringing something into therapy that is a way that they're probably comforting themselves. But I have 2 stuffies in my bed, and I'm 54 years old, so I'm pro stuffy.
I think it also could be a way of fully experiencing the corrective experience of therapy.
Of reparenting.
You get us as therapists providing a safe and loving and unconditional positive regard, Rebecca. But you don't get the physical sensation that
and we can't touch or hold our clients.
Well,
so.
we can. It's just generally not done and extremely risky and can be problematic for many clients.
So it's a way for the client to have that level of comfort.
Yeah. So you can get both the emotional, verbal, spiritual hug and a proxy cuddler in your giant octopus.
And I used to do the flip when I worked across the street from Magic Mouse Toys in Pioneer Square. If a client got to a certain level of tenderness with their inner child, I would say, hey, go across the street and find yourself something to hold. And also, this is part of having a dog in the office. I mean, people just squeeze the bejesus out of Mochi, and she doesn't mind. So, yeah, there's a lot of need for tenderness in therapy, and bringing a stuffy into therapy offers that level of tenderness.
Mm-hmm. Another email, patron Marina from Los Angeles. She says, I worked as a crisis counselor for 2 years and experienced severe burnout. Crisis counselor 2 years and experienced severe burnout. I'm going to be starting an MSW program in the fall and would love to hear about your experiences with burnout and vicarious trauma and get advice for managing this as a future clinician. Rebecca, what do you think?
So, yes, I have a 6-hour presentation that I do on vicarious trauma. So I'm just reviewing it right now. I have a book on vicarious trauma. It's available on Amazon called Vicarious Trauma Illustrated, where I go over, it's what the presentation is. I go over 5 theories: psychoanalytic, Jungian, feminist, narrative, and mindfulness, how they would explain vicarious trauma. So, there are the bare basics. It's going to be really hard in your internship and at the beginning, but, sometimes it's how you organize your day. And if there's certain really traumatizing clients, if you need to stack them at the beginning of the day, as opposed to trying to do it at the end. The statistics are the more traumatized the clients are, which I don't know who's not traumatized coming into therapy now. The higher the rates of vicarious trauma are.
What is vicarious? What is
vicarious
burnout?
Trauma is when you begin to feel basically secondary trauma. You begin to experience the PTSD that your clients experience. So fatigue, flashback, you're avoiding certain parts of town. You often are losing sleep or are always sleepy or are avoiding your friends or social contact because...
Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
You lack empathy.
Yes.
You start to have the inability to feel and express empathy.
Yeah, compassion fatigue.
Is a key component to not only providing positive outcomes in your clients, but also just enjoying your work.
And providing positive regard.
Yeah.
We're just going to throw that term back and
Well, we need a jargon. We
need better jargon.
Like pause reg. We got to provide pause reg. When you're pause reg with your RXs and your
not with your RXs,
with your PTSs,
with your CLTs,
with your CLTs,
and it's
and your pause reg
up
arrow pause reg.
It's a lot. This work is a lot. And so I would say, keep your hobbies. keep your friends, keep your fun activities. Also, another thing is people begin to feel guilty about doing things that are fun because there's so much out there. They should be working harder. I do a lot of encouraging people of like, you don't need to work any harder. You're working plenty hard. There's pressure that people put on themselves to like learn some new theory or do some new thing. And I would say self-care, pace that stuff out. If you stick this career out, I'm on my third manifestation of who I am as a therapist.
What does that mean?
Art therapist, somatic therapist, sex therapist.
Oh, I see. Right.
And I did those rotations to address burnout.
Oh, really?
I think so. I need
What do you mean?
new.
Like, what were you feeling before the sex
Just
therapy?
like, what's next? And
Is it boredom or burnout?
these are great questions. I mean, I think for me, it was, oosh, can I do another 20 years of 15 to 20 trauma clients a week? I should probably be mixing it up. And I have to say the sex therapy stuff, I'm like so excited and my brain's turning back on. And
Because, we typically, for therapists, we come from the ilk that likes a challenge, likes to learn things, likes to feel newly competent in something,
we're lifelong learners.
Yeah. So
We're LLLs.
Yeah. So
Experiencing VT, have you tried being an LLL?
yeah. Vicarious, right. So with I would categorize that as the boredom side of things, not the burnout. I mean, boredom's a strong word, but
I was ready for some variete,
yeah. So
which is not a clinical term.
yeah. I choose my V to address my VT.
This is really fun. We should only speak in jargon.
I know. I mean, in a way, that's all language is jargon, right? Like every word is.
Well, right. I mean, so there's this very funny video that's out right now where this linguist is at a high school and he gives.
I saw that. Yeah.
Oh, it's so brilliant. So for people who haven't seen it, he gives the entire, or many parts of the lecture are in the lingo of Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
And it's just very, very funny. And the kids are losing it to hear an adult try and speak like them.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't tell if the kids were laughing
At him or with him.
right, because
But
I could.
either way, it's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's anyway, but yeah. So the way that I think about burnout is and vicarious trauma, which some people, and sometimes I'll even frame it this way as the same thing, or vicarious.
It's very close.
But I think that there is a Venn diagram in that vicarious trauma and secondary PTSD is, as Rebecca's saying, you absorb the PTSD of the client. Another way of framing it, I think it might even be a different experience, is that you are literally being traumatized by visualizing and hearing the stories about other people's traumas.
And knowing that these things exist. I mean, you enter into many, many worlds. When you do
Right.
this
So
work.
it's not that you're absorbing someone's PTSD in this situation. You're just essentially a witness to a horrific event repeatedly throughout the day. And it's your job to hear and to be fully open and to allow a client to explore their narratives. And
So an example for me is when I worked at Asian counseling, I would come home and say to my partner, I don't know if the Vietnam War is over. And this is in 2002. Can you please tell me that the Vietnam War is over? Because in the environment that I am in, the Vietnam War is still occurring.
yeah.
And, that's a wild ride to go on every day. Or you see it when people are working on Alzheimer's units and they are so spacey at the end of the day. And, I would do, when I was supervising folks on an Alzheimer's unit, like we'd have to take the first 10 minutes, and I'd be like, come back. Like, here we are. We have our current memories and you enter.
It's sort of not as dire, but my mom would be like this because she would be in the daycare at home, and there would be a transition where she would treat everyone like they were 4 years old, and then slowly kind of transition out. But the part of burnout that is outside of actual secondary PTSD is that the way that I think about it is that the brain is physical, and it uses resources and neurochemicals that become depleted. And when it comes to certain circuits and pathways being repetitively used, then we will have difficulty doing it in that fatigue state. We all know what that feels like at the end of the day when we've had a long day. Say you, I don't know, were planning a wedding and the wedding happened that day, and you were running around and on point the whole day and thinking and talking, and then at the end of the day you just sort of flop down on the couch and you just can't do anything. You can't even think, you can't talk, you can't respond to emails, and you're even though physically you're fine because you weren't like literally running a marathon, but your brain feels like it ran a marathon. Well, the same happens if you are repetitively providing empathy and care and love to someone and absorbing it. It takes a toll.
Which is why I write CLT up.
If you typed it out, you could have a autocorrect that could CLT.
Yes.
As a client.
Yeah. I mean, this work is hard. It's why at 5 years out of graduate school, 75% of people have left the field.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
What's that?
Look up the attrition rate of therapists. It's
I mean, I'll look it up
intense.
later, but I can't imagine. I mean, if that's true, that is not my experience, because the vast majority of people that I have worked with, both as a professor and as a colleague. So you're saying after 5 years after graduation, 75% of mental health people are no longer working in mental health?
Yeah.
I mean, is that your experience?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
All the students you worked with and all the friends you have in most of them aren't therapists anymore? Yeah. I only know like one or two people I can think of off the top of my head who graduated and isn't a therapist today. I'm trying to think. I mean, of course, I don't keep track of everybody,
right.
but
and they don't keep track of you. I mean,
Yeah.
if they leave the field, they're probably not reaching out to
well,
you.
okay, I can think of. I mean, out of the literal thousands of people, I can think of 3 people off the top of my head. I mean, one didn't graduate, so that doesn't really count, right? But it kind of counts, I guess. Actually, the 2 other people I'm thinking of were really good friends of Bob and me. We were a foursome. The 4 of us were, really tight in graduate school, and me and Bob became therapists and are still therapists. But these 2 other students.
So just if you look at your small pod, it's 50%.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but there's probably other of course there are other factors
Right.
as to why people drop out. Like,
Yeah.
they can't pay their bills, and
Right.
it's not the
And it's
fantasy that,
also, 90% of the people in the field are women, and they are responsible for childcare and all that other and elder care, and people leave the field for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
Also, some of the people who go to grad school don't actually need the work, too. Anyways, side topic. So in vicarious trauma, the trick is to really try and keep yourself alive, whether that's through activism or a spiritual practice or an exercise practice. It's always interesting to me the percentage of my friends who are Buddhists, who become Buddhist, because it's kind of a religion that fits in well with this discipline of, accepting that life is extremely complicated. And I have so many friends that go off on silent retreats all the time for...
Right. Yeah. So, very much so. And monitoring, having a very good ability to monitor your, where you are on the burnout scale. Because for me, with a lot of my trainees, they didn't have a way of evaluating it because it's not a typical thing.
And it didn't get taught. I mean, I had a system that I would have students do the third quarter, because you read so many reaction papers at Antioch that you're just like, ugh, I can't read another one of these. So the third quarter of their internship, I would have them do a vicarious trauma evaluation of themselves.
Yeah.
How is it?
Because there are measures.
Yeah. How is it impacting how you see the world? How is it impacting your spiritual beliefs? How is it impacting how you feel about being alone or being with others? How is it impacting
sleep, diet?
Right. How you spend your time, how you feel about your body. It often, I've said this, I'll say this again, it really impacts, like, people are like, I don't go to that part of town anymore. You know, like, it impacts a lot. How you feel about your personal safety and your family's safety.
Okay. And on the burnout side, the non-PTSD side, are you looking forward to seeing clients? Mm-hmm. Because that can be a factor. And for some, it can feel like an inevitable thing. Like, well, that's what this job ends up turning into, is that it becomes routine or it just becomes work. But it can be a major sign of burnout if you're dreading going to work, right? Mm-hmm. There's one more email, and it's the last email.
Okay, I just want to say, like, the Sunday scaries, right? Like, you just, on Sunday, you're just dreading Monday.
And that could be a lot of factors, right?
Yeah.
It could be you're at the wrong job. It could be because your boss is an asshole. It could just be because you're doom scrolling on TikTok or Twitter too much or something. But we've never reached the end of the doc.
Okay,
so if
we've got 10 minutes.
Okay. Long-term patron Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen.
She says, when I was in graduate school for counseling, I was taught to broach any cultural differences with clients.
Which means bring it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's the term they use.
Right. Not wear a brooch.
Right. I have a black client, so I'm gonna have like a
explain our jargon.
Yeah. I now work at a university in a program to support low-income students through college. Most of my students are Black, Hispanic, and South Asian, and I am queer, white, cis woman, so we always have cultural differences. I broach here and there, but more often than not, students laugh when I do so and say, Miss C, you're cool, don't worry, or something to that effect. I've also had students tell me about their white professors teaching a racial inequity sociology class, which the professors broached the subject of their race. Every time, students will tell me they didn't need to do that. So my question is broaching cultural differences still the best practice? This got me thinking. Was research on broaching completed by white counselors? Was its effects researched on BIPOC clients? You know, just chiming in here.
Yes.
Basically, they're saying,
why
is this just white people making shit up?
Yes.
Did they actually ask BIPOC people if they want to be broached this guy? Because that's, it's not cultural differences. I mean, it is cultural differences, but often it's white counselors that are.
Right. I'm introducing it as white privilege.
Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. What do you think?
I still do it, I will say.
Yeah.
If something super loaded comes up, I just often say, like, I just want to acknowledge.
What do you mean by loaded?
So I'm just trying to think of, like, so the example that I'm thinking of is there was a conviction or non-conviction that came down in a police brutality case, and a client asked to have the session off the day the decision came down, and I didn't charge them for their session, and I understood the cultural reasons that they just could not be out in the world that day. And then when they came back, I just brought it up, like, how is it to discuss this with a white therapist? So I don't do it constantly, but I'll do it when it seems really relevant.
Right. So that's my advice, is that now sometimes it might be helpful, given your circumstance and the vibe you're getting and your experience with people, that broaching without there being an obvious reason might be helpful. But generally speaking, just arbitrarily broaching every time, because there's always a cultural difference,
right,
with everyone. The chance of you sharing every single cultural influence on your life or cultural identity is almost impossible.
And like
So-
the client, I'm thinking of the one client I have that's like probably the most similar to me right now, and our lives are completely different.
Yeah. Now, appreciating is important, the differences, noting it as a clinician or a professional, but also sometimes broaching it. Like one of the things that I would broach out of the blue, I don't do this so much anymore. I don't know why. Maybe I should think about it. But for the first 20 years of my career, I would always broach to a client that I wasn't, this is complicated. But eventually I got to a point where I would broach that I was straight to a gay client.
Yeah, I was thinking actually the flip is it's like now with being a sex therapist, I'm starting to see more straight couples.
Yeah.
And, there's times that I have to say, like, I don't exist in that culture. I need more info.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of reasons. One is that to disclose that you're not in the cultural pocket, so you don't know exactly what they're going through, and so you're going to have to muddle through it together. And it's also an acknowledgement. But another purpose of it is because the reason why I would tell people out of the blue that I was straight eventually, I didn't do this in the beginning, was that I wanted to signal a lot of things.
Sorry, hold on.
You're going to sneeze?
Your neighbor just planted like a ton of stuff. I don't know if you've noticed.
What do you mean?
There's like a whole new garden out as you walk in.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to sneeze. Sorry.
Does it make you sneeze?
Allergies, yeah.
From the flowers?
Yeah.
Okay. My neighbor planted.
It's like all brand new up there. I don't know if you've noticed.
Yeah. The flowers and the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It passed.
So the broaching is also a power and privilege communication of look, I have privilege in this scenario, and by saying that, I'm acknowledging it, and it is soothing to people that are oppressed sometimes. That I would just say, so I just want to tell you that I'm straight, and I therefore have privilege, and I want to acknowledge that, and I'm willing to talk about it. I might say that occasionally with black clients as well, and as long as I would often get appreciative people like, well, thanks for bringing it up, but I would occasionally get some clients when I would broach where they would say, yeah, I don't really need to talk about it.
Yeah, and there's huge generational differences. I mean, I noticed like with the generation Gen Z, gender is like so blown open that, I was a gender rebel in my generation, and to them, I'm as square as can possibly be.
Yeah.
So, I think some of this, it would be interesting to look at generational patterns about broaching, about privilege around race. Do the younger generations see it differently than we learned these concepts 20 years ago, in a completely different time.
When it wasn't talked about at all.
Yeah. And these students have grown up, with diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're if they're from certain liberal pockets, they've been immersed in discussions about this, and maybe they're tired of it. They don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, or they're more comfortable or something. It should also be pointed out that some broaching from therapists would be from the oppressed identity. So it's not always broaching privilege as a therapist. It could be broaching something else. I had a student broach to me that they were working class, and I'll never forget it. Because the assumption that I was operating from was that all students were at least middle class. And she pulled me aside. She's like, "I think you're assuming everyone's." I was homeless like 2 months before I was in this program. So. I pass as middle class, but I was not. I've never been middle class. I've always been working class or lower class or something.
And I'm thinking too about like broaching my Jewishness. That some clients, especially in Seattle, it would never cross their mind that I represent this really different culture, and so sometimes there's times that it's been incredibly helpful, but there's also times where I have to say to a client, like, you need to tell me more. I mean, I'm really thinking about working with Mormon clients where I'm like, I need more information. Like,
Right. So it's another broaching of sorts.
yeah.
But the last thing I'll say is that my perception of trends within our field, I think, resulted in a lot of students in the last 5 years being overly encouraged to broach constantly.
Yes.
Just as
Out of fear.
as a fear or as a rule or something. And what long-term patron Kristen is running into is the people you're working with get annoyed if you're constantly inserting it in a strange way. Now, having said that, even if it is, especially with like students and that sort of thing, if you're broaching and they're reacting like, you're cool, we don't need to get into that. Some people, when they are broached to, they're not used to it and they feel like they're now kind of on the spot, right? They don't know what to say. And so they might, out of nervousness, just say like, I don't want to talk about that. Why are you bringing that up? And then, so sometimes it's how you bring it up or in what context or something. And really they might appreciate it, but they're just not, they've never been in that situation before, so they don't know what to say.
And when I was in the CIIS program, every professor would begin their presentation with an identity slide, what they felt was important to know about them. And so I've started doing that in my presentations, and it's been really interesting, where I say, like, I come from this very unique perspective. Here's what I think has influenced this presentation and my perspective. So I do all the broaching, bam, in the beginning. It comes up later.
Yeah, and it's modeling, it's saying we can talk about this here, and it's okay. So there's a lot of things that are being signaled and communicated, it's case by case. But anyway,
I'm so
end of episode.
So sweaty.
So when you came in, you were cold, and I gave you.
I have your socks on, but I'm also wearing.
Well, I want to tell the story.
Jacket, a scarf, your socks.
I want to tell the story of your socks because I think it's very important. So you come in and you say, "Oh, I'm so cold," and I'm actually hot, and you're like, "Oh, I want to ask you for some socks to wear, but that would be taking things too far." You're just kind of speaking to yourself, and I just, I was sort of getting ready, but then I thought, well, wait a second, we can think outside the box, and that's just a cultural silliness that we don't need to adhere to. And so, and I actually have socks in my office because sometimes I like to put on socks in my office. And so I said, no, Rebecca, if you want to wear my socks, here are some socks. And you put on a pair of my goofy ass black. They're sort of like
Costco,
athletic. Yeah, sort of Costco.
Stretched out.
Gold tip. But those are the main socks I wear. And you actually put them on. And I love that because so many people have a need and they are either not offered, or when they are offered, they're like, no, I'm okay. And it's just like, it's such not a bother. And I get a gift of being able to, make your feet warm. And now you're so warm that you're hot.
I am so glad I accepted your socks, because once I put them on, I realized my feet were so much colder. It's one of those days in Seattle that it's like going to be 75 at 4 o'clock. But when I got here at 10 o'clock, it was windy and cold.
Yeah.
And I was completely underdressed. So it would have been a drag to give this whole presentation, be on the podcast and be really cold.
Yeah.
So I was not cold. My feet were nice and toasty.
Yeah. So you were taking care of yourself.
Yes. So please take care of yourself, because when you accept other people's kindness, it relieves stress. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that the jargon for the stress relief? Don't stay cold, motherfucker. No.
Yeah. Take care of yourself. Take yos. Take a yos. Sorry.
Take a yos. Take a yos because you're worth it.